Welcome to the School of Rock Bottom podcast with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist, a performing arts school principal, and a mental health coach. It's these careers and passions combining that have given birth to this podcast. Those working in entertainment are twice as likely to suffer with depression, 15 times more likely to have an anxiety disorder, and those working across the creative industries are 3 times more likely to have a mental health problem, with 60% having had suicidal thoughts. So this podcast I've created so that amazing creatives can come on here who have lived through a rock bottom but have survived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out, and these stories need to be told. And I'm really excited today and really honoured because I've got the brilliant Kelly Wenham in the studio.
Thank you.
How are you doing, Kelly?
Very well. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on today. Before we start, and I want to first apologise to those watching on YouTube. I don't have an auto cue, so I'm just going to look down because I don't want to make any mistakes here.
No, and I don't expect you to know my entire CV off by heart. Don't worry.
Well, and I can do it in various accents if you like. And by the way, if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. I must remember to get that in there. Right, so I've got Kelly Wenham with me today. A quick bio. So Kelly Wenham is an accomplished actress, voiceover artist, writer and director. At the age of 16, she landed the role of Jess Buckley on the smash hit ITV drama Where the Heart Is, which she appeared as a series regular for 4 years. Wow. Other credits include Coronation Street, Holby, Steel River Blues, Life on Mars, Edge of Heaven, Merlin and Dead Set. Films include cult comedy horror Double Date and another equally deranged character in Tales from the Lodge, which co-starred Mackenzie Crook and Johnny Vegas. Kelly is also a writer. Her first ever half-hour TV script was optioned by Clerkenwell Films in 2017. Entitled Bulimia, the show was based on her own struggles with bulimia with a unique, darkly comic tone. Last summer, she filmed her lead role in the dark indie comedy A Kind of Kidnapping and has just finished filming a new comedy drama for Channel 4 and Showtime called Entitled, with Brett Gelman. Kelly continues to write her own projects, but also collaborates with her occasional writing partner and husband, Dan Clark. How was that?
That was pretty damn good.
Was that pretty damn good?
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of talk today around eating disorders.
Yeah.
And before we get to your first question, I was really shocked by some stats I came across. Doing some research on the build-up to this podcast. These are probably stats you already know. Eating disorders is the number one leading cause of death from mental health conditions, which I had no idea was the case. And if you've got anorexia, you're 18 times more likely to commit suicide. And if you have bulimia, 7 times more likely to commit suicide. And 1.25 million people, it's estimated, have an eating disorder in the UK.
Wow.
And it just goes to show the enormity of the problem. And this is why I think it's so important that you've come on today to talk to me and to help other people. And
thank you.
I'm sorry to just kind of cut to the quick with this question. Yeah. Can you try and take us to a rock bottom moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this question. I'm quite nervous to talk about this, if I'm honest, because I've never really been this honest, like publicly about it before. Mm. But I realise how important it is to kind of move away my ego and just be really honest, because if it can help one person, then it's worth it.
100% agree.
So I'm going to lay my soul open for you all to judge me. God, there's been about 4, but the one that feels like probably the most dangerous was there'd been a few suicide attempts. I was about 23, living on my own in a studio flat in Tottenham. And my bulimia had got so bad that I my whole day was just me going to Tesco, buying a trolley of food, pretending, I had a family, because, the shame of buying that amount of food for one person, putting it all in my car, driving back to my studio flat, getting all the shopping out, and literally I would just eat and throw up all day on my own. And I developed this technique, which I'm almost a little bit worried about saying in case anyone copies it, which you shouldn't, by the way, because it's absolutely the worst thing you could ever do to yourself. But it was getting a toothbrush and sticking it down my throat so that I'd know how to hit the right point so that the food would come up. And I remember I got so complacent about doing it that I actually, whilst it was down my throat, I lost it. And it was like, it was on the finger, it was kind of like a millimetre away, and I grabbed it again and got it back out of my throat. But there was like a couple of seconds where I thought, this is how I die. And I remember thinking, right, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to stop. That was my rock bottom, And then that lasted like 24 hours before I was, just justifying, well, I'll just do a quick one. I'll just go to the shop and get a few bits and, just get it over with, and then I'll be able to get on with my day. And that's how aggressive it got for me, and how it just took over my complete existence. And I was so isolated. I basically lost my most of my 20s because I was in addiction. So yeah, that was one of them. And
it sounds like a miracle that you sat in front of me if you had 4 suicide attempts up until that point.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't a suicide attempt. That was yeah. The toothbrush was just. It had got to that point where...
But prior to that, I think you said that
yeah, no, I had... There'd been I think there'd been two. There'd been 2 suicide attempts. One was with another person who I actually met in a 12-step recovery meeting.
Right.
And... this is OA, Overeaters Anonymous. And we used to go, we met, and we really, she was sort of, did something, she wasn't an actor, but she was a model actually. So we shared a lot of the same sort of insecurities and pressures and stuff. And we were about the same age, and we started hanging out together. And at first it was really positive. We started sort of supporting each other and going to meetings together. And then it got it's like anything, 2 people with the same issue. It's like the blind leading the blind.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can go pretty toxic.
Mm.
And it did. And it got to a point where, yeah, we sort of we were both in so much pain that we took an overdose and ended up in hospital.
Right.
So yeah.
And am I right in saying, Kelly, that your first kind of inclination that you might have an eating disorder was in puberty? If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of start there, if that's all right, and kind of work through. We know each other personally, don't we? We've worked together. We used to be neighbours as well. I miss those days.
Me too. I miss Belsize Park.
Hey, don't give my address away. Although I have moved since then, so you can't find me.
To someone even probably... Is it nicer?
I don't know. It depends who you ask.
Okay.
Depends who you ask.
Well, I've downgraded. I'm in South East London now, darling. It's not Belsize Park.
I love South East London.
No, it's great.
But I remember from our conversations before that I think you were at school, you were going through puberty, and that's when you first started to notice there might be some issues around food. I just wondered if we could maybe start there and and then get through to the present day. How did it kind of start, your first realization that something might be up?
So I was just never really any good at anything at school. I was like really dyslexic. I'm still on the sort of, am I ADD or am I not?
Right.
So I'm still sort of battling with this whole ADD thing, which I know is really current at the moment. But so I had attention problems. I was dyslexic, and so I was in the lowest sets for everything, and I just wasn't doing very well. And the only thing I sort of had, like my only like agency, was like that I was kind of a bit pretty, and that was that. And it's so sad that that's all I felt like I had that I could offer the world. Looking back, and I got this opportunity to do some modelling when I was 14, and this agency came over, and I was kind of like offered this opportunity anyway to go to Japan and stay there for 3 months, and there was the opportunity to earn quite a lot of money because they liked like dark hair, pale skin. Like I was like apparently, you know, good. Like I would have worked in the sort of the climate. There was anyway.
You would have been huge in Japan.
Yeah, basically. That's how they sold it to me. They were like, you know, your daughter's going to make a lot of money. It's 3 months. We pay for the flights. We pay for the accommodation. Like, and there's loads of people who go all the time. Like, there's this person. And my parents were a bit like, well, my mum was a bit, But anyway, I convinced them that I wanted to go, and it meant that I like missed quite a lot of school. So I was leaving school sort of like a month before the summer. So everyone at school found out. So suddenly like, oh, Kelly Wenham's going to be a supermodel.
Right.
Like it got blown out of proportion.
Right.
And I just remember people being like, what? She's going to be a model. Like sort of, whether that was true or not, like Pete, that's how I felt. Whether that was happening or it was my insecurities about how I looked and that I wasn't good enough. That's how it felt. But I'd been chosen, and I went, and then so I was meant to go for 3 months, and after 2 weeks, they were like, yeah, I hadn't basically got any jobs, and we were driven around to about 5 castings a day, like in a people carrier, like the models. We were driving around to all these.
That sounds pretty brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I was 14.
Yeah.
I mean, like at the time, I thought it was amazing because I was like, I'm on my own without my parents in Japan, and we get loads of free drinks at a club around the corner every night. And I just get driven around in this people carrier.
Wow.
So it kind of was like really exciting. But then after 2 weeks, they were like, yeah, you haven't booked any jobs and you're too fat.
Oh my God.
So I was like, yeah.
Did they actually say that to you at 14?
I mean, they would weigh people at the agency. Yeah, they would weigh people at the agency. That was, and like not every model there had an eating disorder. Like some of them genuinely were just very, like they were that build. They were just very, very thin, and they would eat like whatever. It wasn't a thing for them. But there was a few of us who were like a bit more athletic, a bit bigger, a bit more curvy. Not even curvy, but you know, like not really super skinny. And it just wasn't the look they wanted.
So, am I right in thinking that you, because of your dyslexia, you had low self-esteem because of that. You then sort of looked at the way that you looked as a way to sort of validate yourself.
Totally.
Then you get this modeling job, and then once you enter that industry, you're being told basically you're not good enough. This is what you're telling yourself.
This is it. And so it's like, I'm finally, oh, this might be my thing that I'm kind of good at. And then, oh no, you're actually shit at that too.
Right.
That's how I took it. And I remember coming back from being sent home, like the shame of being sent home. I felt so bad about myself. And I remember coming to the airport, and my mum and dad were there, and my brother and my sister, and
It's okay.
Obviously still working through a lot of this stuff. The first thing that my dad said to me was, God, we thought you'd be a wisp of a thing by now. And it completely, like, crushed me. I felt so like I had this belief that I was a failure, that I was a complete and utter failure. And my mum sort of didn't really say anything, and my sister and my brother didn't really say anything either. Like, I don't think they really knew how to handle it. They didn't really have the tools to be like, you're great, actually, and fuck them. And you've got so much more than what they think is aesthetically beautiful. But they didn't have any of those tools because, it's generational trauma. They weren't given that by their parents. They weren't emotionally supported. So they didn't know how to kind of like support me emotionally and kind of make me feel all right about that experience.
I can't imagine any 14-year-old person going through what you went through and being told what you did, which sounds it was the norm as well that was going on, that it wasn't personal to you, that these things were said, would scar anybody.
Well, the girl I went out there with, she stayed for the 3 months and made quite a lot of money. And the irony was that she didn't really want to go. Like, she was a bit like, I kind of, miss home and like kind of miss school. And I was like, oh my God, I love it here. It's great. But I was the one who got sent home after 2 weeks.
Right. So how did that then manifest itself when you came back to England, and your relationship with food, or maybe not even with food, how you started to sort of view yourself? Was that then the slippery slope that kind of led to
where
it went to? Right.
I mean, yeah, that was definitely the beginning of it. And my mum was always a chronic dieter, so I'd had that sort of model to me. And yeah, so I came back, and I remember saying to my mum, I don't want to go back to school because everyone's going to know like I'm a failure. So please, can I stay home? And she was like, okay. So she let me stay home. So I was kind of like hiding out. And sometimes we would go to the local shops, and I'd be like hoping that no one from my school would see me, because they'd be like, oh my God, she's back. What happened? And in that time, I wasn't going to school. I was sort of in the house on my own. And I had sort of planned in my head to sort of start restricting my food, but it just went the other way. Like, instead, I think I was so angry that I just started eating on the rage.
Okay.
And I've always been a bit of a rebel. So it was almost like I was trying to sort of punish myself and everyone else. I was just angry. I was angry and insecure. And so I just started eating. And inevitably I put on weight, and then I felt ashamed about that. So I had, oh my God, I'm a failure, and now I've put on weight, and I just isolated myself. And then I started dieting to try and, get the weight off that I'd put on.
Yeah.
And it just became this cycle of like, panic dieting, going, well, I really want to see people, and people are going to judge me because I've put on 3 kilos. So how am I going to lose that 3 kilos before like that person's party, say? So I do like the cabbage soup diet, which is all you eat is fruit and vegetables for 7 days.
Okay.
And I would just live in this cyclical, if that's the right word, pattern of I was either eating everything and anything, or I was like super, super strict and on a diet.
Right.
And it was just black or white. It was one or the other. There wasn't any in between.
And I suppose that was the start of it being bulimia. You've kind of alluded there that, you know, the overeating and then not purging at this point, but excessively dieting, which I believe is a form of purging, or over-exercising. Would that be correct in saying with bulimia?
Definitely, but I mean, I didn't know that, and I was brought up in a culture where nobody really still to this day, people are like, you can't be bulimic unless you're, you know, throwing up, which I don't agree with. You know, you can be bulimic if it's about, you don't have to be physically purging to be bulimic. You can be completely obsessed with food, dieting, binging, over-exercising. Like, that's a form of bulimia. It doesn't just mean sticking your fingers down your throat. Yeah. And I think people there's still maybe a little bit of a stigma about it. So yeah, that was that kind of, I existed in that pattern, got into acting when I was about 16. So it was kind of like, I just left school.
I think maybe I should just say, hold up. When you say just got into acting.
Right, okay.
Didn't you land a series regular?
Yeah. Well,
that's what you mean by just got into acting.
Okay, yeah, right. So the agency I'd gone to Japan with, they were doing this acting course that you had to audition for. And it was like, they had a few people on Coronation Street, and it was like a Manchester-based, they were a model agency, but they had actors. And they were doing these auditions for this course. And so I don't know what it was inside of me. Oh, no, I do. I do know what it was. I had done a school play, and I played a villain, and it was the first time people started saying nice things to me.
Right.
Like, as in complimentary things, because I wasn't very good at anything. So
you believed?
I mean, I had a lot of E's and F's, so on my GCSE, so I wasn't. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I can completely understand from a 14-year-old mindset why you would believe that. The way you've just described it, you know, from your point of view, I can understand why you believe that. But looking back now, you can't see that as true, surely.
No.
I mean, Judi Dench is dyslexic, and she's pretty darn good.
And Whoopi Goldberg, and Tom Cruise, and I can't remember because I'm dyslexic.
but through the lens of a 14-year-old, you're telling yourself, now I'm good at something.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, other people are telling me I'm good at something.
Right.
Like, I remember a teacher came up to me and she was like, and because I did an accent as well, I don't know where this people were just obviously doing their normal voices. And I'd been watching Joanna Lumley at home on something that my parents had been watching, and I loved her voice and I loved her. And I thought, I'm gonna do Joanna Lumley's voice. So I just created a character, you know, and didn't, and somehow had the confidence to do this Joanna Lumley voice in this school play at 15, around that time. And then like teachers came up to me and said, "You were really good. You were. I really enjoyed you in that. You were really good." And oh my God, it made me feel. I mean, it was like a drug.
Yeah.
It was like,
what more of this?
Somebody loves me. Right. I mean, that's. I mean, obviously, I enjoyed it as well because I have been looking back at that time. Like, what was it about acting that I really loved? And it was the comedy. It was a play, but my role was a villain, and she was the comedic element of the play, and so I was getting the laughs on stage. And I just remember feeling so alive.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, being a teenager, and I started drama at 6, but totally that, that a character would just give you agency, and you feel such power from the character that you've been given. So Where the Heart Is, how did that happen? So you were with an agency, and did you just audition and bang, you got the role? Was that basically it?
So yeah, I did that course that they were running for auditions for. They were auditions for a course, so it was like you got to get through that to get to that to get to that to get to the course.
Wow.
Managed to get through that, and then I did a very small course on TV acting, which was very, very basic, like 8 weeks of like basically how to read a script and how to be natural.
Okay,
that's kind of what they taught us.
That's why I got drama school. I got a weekend.
Really?
Yeah, one weekend. Yeah.
And they started sending us out on auditions after that. It was like pretty well. They selected certain people. They started sending us out on auditions, and I think it was the second audition that I went to was Where the Heart Is, and it was a regular, and I got it.
Wow.
And I was like...
And how long did you do that for? How long did that run?
4 years in the end.
Wow, what an incredible job. Amazing. Now, someone that doesn't understand eating disorders or mental health very well might conclude, well, that would put the end to your eating disorder because you had low self-esteem.
Yeah.
You went out and did this modelling job that didn't work out the way you thought it would be. And then this big TV show comes in, you get a regular, and guess what? Everything's sorted. But obviously that isn't what happened. What happened once you got that job? It didn't feel that hole, or this belief that you weren't good enough or you weren't good at anything? It sounds like it didn't fix that mindset.
No, you're right. Why didn't it? Why didn't I kind of go, this is validation?
Had the seed been set too deep by that point? Do you think if you'd have got Where the Heart Is in that moment that you went to Japan, things would have changed? Or do you think that the seed was already set? And I appreciate that's a very complex question to ask you, and you might not know.
I think I always had a thing. So even when I was cast in, but that could have been set up from the modelling. But I think, my mum was always dieting. She was always dieting. She was... And my dad was always kind of telling her, well done, if she lost weight. So there was this sort of idea that if you were thin, you were doing well, or you were a good girl. Do you know what I mean? And some other comments he made, which still are with me, but I'm very aware of them and how, that wasn't normal, but to me that was just normal, like stuff that he would say about.
It's incredible, isn't it? Things that you believe to be true at a very young age, that how they stick with most people and sort of then become a blueprint on how you kind of see the world after that point. And and I think people are getting more aware of that with young people, with each passing year.
Yeah. I mean, it just completely those first years of your life just informs your belief system, doesn't it? And then you go on from that. This is what I'm starting to understand. And so changing that fundamental belief system that's really early on takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's what I'm finding.
In terms of your relationship with food at this point now, working on Where the Heart Is, how does that change or not change at this juncture? So you're now working on this TV show. Talk us through that. What's your relationship with food like during that period?
So I still had the whole thing, thin is better, thinner is better. So I didn't go into it kind of going, I'm fine. I always went into it thinking, well, I have to be still thin on my thinner side because otherwise I'm going to be rejected.
Right.
That was it. Because I'd been rejected, it was like this fear of like it all crumbling. And
it will happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it it didn't really sort anything out. I mean, it kept me a bit busier so that I wasn't at home just like eating and dieting, but it didn't like you say, it didn't fix anything.
Mm.
And it was still going on while I was filming, but I wasn't purging. I wasn't being sick. I was just, always, eating whatever compulsively or dieting. And no one probably really noticed because my weight kind of stayed the same until about the last year of it, I think. Yeah, the last year of it. And then I started to get a bit like I wasn't really getting any storylines, and I just found myself kind of sitting around like mentally bored because I was just not I wasn't being challenged with any of the work. Like I wasn't really getting storylines. I was just kind of like...
Did you take that personally on any level, or did you just sort of take it as, well, the script is what it is, or was there an inner dialogue of, I'm not getting storylines because I'm not good enough, or did you go down that rabbit hole in your head?
You know what? I don't even know. I don't even remember.
I only say that because I'm imagining that I would do that.
Maybe I did. Maybe that's
Right,
why.
okay.
Maybe that's why the bulimia started to then get more aggressive
In that last year.
Yeah.
You might not want to talk about this, but it's something that I know you've mentioned to me before,
Yeah.
that one of the consequences of your eating disorder at that point, during that period, was that you ran away.
Yeah.
And left the set. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So I remember buying a house. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was only like 18 and I bought a house.
And still the voice in your head was telling you that you're not successful, you're not good enough.
I mean, for me, it was like the voice in my head's going, it's a terrace, it's a 2 up, 2 down, like it's not exactly, Hollywood.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's Stockport. It's
That's where your accent's from. Now it makes sense.
So yeah, I bought this house and I got a flatmate. Not that I needed one, actually. I could pay the mortgage. I was working. But my parents were always very much, like very they were very tight with money. I'm just going to say it. Okay. So yeah, even though I had enough money to pay the mortgage, they were like, no, you have to get a lodger, that's the right thing to do. And it was a friend of a friend. She moved in. And it got to a whole new level because it turned out she had food issues too, but she was purging daily.
Right.
And so the first couple of weeks of us living together was sort of normal, but then when we got to know each other, it was like, oh my God, you do, I think like that, you think like that. And there was this connection.
Was that the first time you'd made yourself sick, or was it just before that? Was it around this period that you started making yourself sick?
She I think had done it a couple of times, right, but kind of a bit unsuccessfully. And then she essentially taught me how to do it.
Wow. Okay. So
that's why it was a really toxic relationship. But we were, I was 19, she was 19. I mean, and then it got crazy, really crazy. Like,
and
it got crazy. I
hope you don't mind me asking you this, but when you make yourself sick, do you get a high from it? Do you get like a buzz afterwards, or does it feel like the punishment that you talked about earlier? Because you talked about angry eating earlier as a form of punishment. Does it feel like that, like a kind of an attack on oneself, or is there like a brief high and then a crash? What's it like?
In the beginning, for me, it was just about getting the food out so that I didn't put on weight.
So it's just very functional, part of a functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it became a high, an addictive high where and I didn't realise this until later on, where it really would like block out feelings. So you would, plus I was eating so much sugar and then purging it. So of course, so I was either high from all the sugar, but also I've done a lot of reading about this, and you can then develop an addiction to the actual purging, because it does something to your brain. It releases something that makes you feel a bit buzzy and a bit.
Yeah.
And also there's an element of control.
Yeah.
Like if you don't feel like you're in control of things around you, somehow that makes you feel like in control.
Right.
The fact that you can do that.
And there is a lot of research that's been done around exactly what you just spoke about. Obviously, getting a dopamine release from something, but then also the fear hormone in the brain. So, for example, people that are recovering from substance misuse, they can actually get withdrawal from actually scoring drugs as well as taking them, because
before it's actually entered your body, you're already on a dopamine high.
You're on a dopamine high, but also there's the fear chemicals are working in your body as well, and that then mixes with the dopamine and causes a euphoria. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing in bulimia, but I would assume it's linked.
No.
That if you sense that you're doing something wrong, plus getting something that gives you dopamine, it can be an intoxicating cocktail.
Totally.
And I wonder if there's an element of that.
Oh, it was completely that.
Could I ask you another thing? You mentioned the high of sugar. Could you explain what it's like? I mean, I know what it's like to open a bag of Tang Fastics and, eat quite a few and get a sugar rush. Are you describing something similar, or is it different?
It's like any progressive addiction. At first it starts smaller, and then like my stomach became so, I'd stretched it so that I needed more and more and more and more to literally fill my stomach. And so I don't know how to, that's the only way I know how to answer that. It's like
but you'd eat sugar and get a big high from it.
Yeah, and then it wasn't always just sugar. Like it could have been carbs. But I mean, I never binged on like vegetables.
Right.
You know what I mean? That I wouldn't really get much from that. But
interesting.
Yeah, it was.
It would be more kind of junk food, would it? But sort of high fat things like that.
Well, you know what? And I only learned this later when I got some recovery. It was always the stuff that I'd restricted that I would crave.
Right.
So if I was doing low carb, all I could think about was bread, pasta, chips, crisps. And that would be essentially the next 3 days of binging would be based on those kind of foods.
Right.
And if it was, that's what I mean. There was a correlation of like what I was restricting in the patches in between the binges that you craved. So when I first went into like OA 12-step recovery, it was all about like, okay, our drug is sugar. Like we're like alcoholics and crack addicts, but just with sugar. Okay. So if you take out sugar, like that, you're going to be okay because you're not going to trigger that part of yourself.
Right.
And that does work for some people, but I didn't find that it was a long-term, that I couldn't live like that. It was very, very constricting and very black and white. And it did work at first, and I actually lost weight because I was eating like 3 very healthy meals a day, and everything was weighed and measured so that you couldn't use on food, so that you couldn't kind of like overeat. So you'd weigh your carbs, you'd weigh your...
Oh, wow.
And then you'd have designated snacks, and that was the kind of the way that the 12 steps, the one I was doing, which there's a few different ones. There's like normal OA, and then there's like OA how, which is like very, very, very extreme, version of OA.
I've not even heard of that. Wow.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, really, really intense.
And I suppose one of the issues is that you might have people with all kinds of different eating disorders all going to one place, because Overeaters Anonymous sounds like it's just for binge eating.
Well, this is the whole thing. It's like I ended up going there because I saw a counsellor, and she said to me, have you thought about Overeaters Anonymous? And I was like, isn't that for like obese people? Like, would they accept me? Because I was of a normal weight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My BMI was not over a certain point, so I was considered a normal weight.
And that's right, isn't it, with bulimia? In fact, I think there's 20 things that NICE look for, or around 20 things with bulimia, and only one of them is the way that somebody looks. In other words, you can't tell if someone's bulimic by the way they look. They can be a completely normal weight, can't they?
This is it.
Yeah.
So they recognise that now, do they?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so good, because in my day, you know, I remember going to the doctors and like trying to get help through my GP, and they just weighed me and they were like, okay, well yeah, you know, you do have to be, your BMI has to be below, I think it was like 17 something, 18.
Right.
For you to qualify for any sort of therapy or or to be put into the eating disorder clinic's waiting list.
Wow.
So basically, we're not going to help you. We can't help you.
If you've got bulimia, completely excluded.
Yeah. If you're a normal weight. If you're not, then they're like, okay, well, you're underweight. It's almost like they take it more seriously. But yeah, that's a whole thing that I'm sort of. It really hurts me that there's people out there that can't get any help who, because they're not thin enough. I mean, talk about like playing into a bulimic's head. Like, you already think you're not thin enough.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of going, oh, well, I'm not even thin enough to like qualify for NHS help, when it's about, yeah, like we've said, like, so many bulimics, you would never know. They just look normal. They don't look skinny. That there is, you know, if you're anorexic and bulimic, which, you know, some people are both, you tend to be of a low weight and staying in that range. But
that's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that you could be not just one, you know, just one type of eating disorder. You could have two. I hadn't even really thought of that as a possibility. Wow.
It's like when I was in OA, and when I was, you know, whenever I talked to people with eating disorders, it was like overeaters always wanted to be bulimic. So they were like, oh, I'd love to be able to get rid of this food. And bulimics always wanted to be anorexic, because they were like, oh, I wish I could just restrict and not binge and just be really skinny.
Okay.
So, and then, yeah, going back to the whole kind of going to a therapy group and sitting with loads of people with eating disorders, the idea is that everybody, you know, relates and supports each other. But, and I didn't see this for years. Like, for me, it was toxic.
Okay.
Because it was competitive. You know, you're getting people, anorexics are very competitive about, you know, being thin and if somebody's thinner than them, how are they doing it? And this whole kind of chat about food, weight, it's just, it feels like the more you sort of indulge in it, the more toxic and more of an obsession it can become.
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
and I think it's, you know, really important at this juncture to say that, you know, no two recoveries from any kind of mental health condition are the same. You know, and it might well be that I have a guest on in the future who say OA saved their life.
Totally.
But I think what's really important on this podcast is, rather than me sit here and go, these are the solutions, because, you know, it's always individual and this is your experience. And that's what I really, really want from this podcast, that all these resources and all these experiences are out there so people can be informed and make their own decisions. But it sounds like that very restrictive sort of very rigid structure of OA just didn't work for you.
No.
Fed into that obsessive thinking.
Yeah.
Where did you turn to next then?
Well, I was sort of in OA for years.
Right.
Sort of getting... And that was another thing that didn't work for me because of the black and whiteness of it, that, I'd get, say, like 14 days abstinence, which would be, the abstinence abstaining from binging and purging. And then I would mess up and eat a bit more than I should. And then because I'd messed up, I thought, well, I've lost my day count, so I might as well go for it.
Might as well just go for it, right.
Yeah, and that kind of thinking, because I'm already a very black and white person, I've discovered I'm very all or nothing. So for me, I needed something that was a bit more softer and a bit more grey.
Yeah.
And a bit more like, okay, you've had extra food. Don't make that, don't be, it became a way of me beating myself up more. And ultimately...
And you can't abstain from food. I mean, I can understand why abstinence-based recovery might work for some people around, addictive substances or drugs and alcohol more specifically, because you can cut those out of your diet and still and still live.
Yeah.
You obviously can't do that with food.
Yeah.
And that already in itself, I can understand, is problematic.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. It's not straightforward. It's not as straightforward as just drugs and alcohol completely. It's so much more complex.
And that little grey area that you talk about, that little biting point of a car, if you like, is so different to everybody. Everyone's got their own experience of what that grey means, because it's that sweet spot that eventually is going to lead you down the right path where things start to work and start to help you long term, because you're in a great place now, and you have been for a long time. How did you get into that good place? Where did you go to after OA?
So it took me a really long time to leave OA because I was so scared. There was the thing is about being in those meetings, and I did learn a lot. Like, I learned a lot at an early age because I was sat in meetings with lots of different people from different walks of life, different ages, but yeah, it just I was just sort of stuck in this like really bad loop of sort of getting a couple of weeks recovery and then losing it and then going back to my day count, so starting again, and then feeling so much shame about it, and people just going, just keep coming back, just keep coming to meetings, and keep doing your step work, and I just thought, and I remember someone saying this, because people would just suddenly leave and you'd never see them again. And I remember saying to someone, like, where do people like suddenly go to? Because they're coming to meetings every day and then suddenly they go. And this guy was like, they die.
Wow.
And I was just so scared. I was so scared to leave for a really, really long time. And then I got to a new rock bottom of sort of being stuck in this place where I just wasn't progressing and it wasn't working. And then I can't remember what it was that made me stop going. But it was my intuition. Just told me to just not go for a bit and see what happens. And I was really scared.
And you'd given it a really good go.
Yeah.
I mean, and you probably thought, wow, I've given this everything I've got for quite a long period of time. Try something else.
Well, I still thought, I'm just a bit shit. I'm just not doing this right.
Okay.
I was still beating myself up about it. And then I finally left moved, and I think I was about to start some therapy. I thought, right, I'm going to try therapy.
What kind of therapy did you have? Do you know?
Was it CBT?
Right, okay.
Yeah, some CBT.
Okay.
And that, I was at the start of that, and that wasn't really working. And then I remember finding a video about like a recovery coach or something.
Okay.
And then because of YouTube, started coming across people who are these recovery coaches, and that they're not therapists, and they have often had eating disorders themselves. So you're talking to somebody who really understands.
Okay.
And they're not of the same, you don't just see them once a week for an hour and they listen, and they're much more hands-on, and they're much more, it's just a completely different way of like approaching it.
Wow.
And I remember speaking to this lady over the phone. I was like sat on the steps of my flat, like just feeling so broken, and I was like, I've tried everything. I've literally tried everything I've done. And but I'd been to treatment as well. I'd been to 4 different treatment centres.
Okay.
So I'd gone to South Africa and gone to 2 treatment centres there. I'd gone to 1 in the UK. Yeah. So I'd tried exercising and like going to the gym and like CBT, and I was just like, I just thought, right, I'm never gonna recover, and I'm just gonna have to, I don't know, I'm just gonna end up killing myself, I suppose. That's kind of, I got to that place again, and that was after all of this kind of 10 years of trying to get better.
I see that as someone that just doesn't give up, ever.
Yeah.
I can understand why you'd frame it that way, that you weren't doing it right. I just see that as somebody that just refuses to fail, and just won't throw the towel in. I mean, I really do. You should be hugely commended for just keep going. I will find a solution. It's insanely brave. I hope you know that. I really do.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to even, like take that in now. I'm just.
Is this person you found online? Is this Julie Kerr you're referring to?
Yeah.
She's got a website, I believe.
Yeah.
bulimiafree.com.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to put in the show notes as well, so people can find that. What was it about her approach that helped you, do you think?
So she was really like nothing I'd ever experienced before. She was quite radical in her kind of suggestions, which at first I was like, you can't, she sort of pissed me off, because I was like, you can't tell me to do that. I had all these preconceived ideas about I couldn't eat sugar, and I wasn't safe around, I couldn't trust myself, and I had all these like set ideas.
Yeah.
And this black and whiteness around food, like that's good, that's bad. Do you know what I mean? And she completely challenged all those thinking. I remember the very first time I spoke to her, she went, we were chatting, and I was just like, she was like, what are you craving right now? And I was like, I just want a piece of chocolate cake, but I just know it's going to lead to a binge, and I'm like, I'm on day 3, and I'm like, I just know I can get through this. And she was like, okay, go.
It's all right, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a builder just turned up outside, but don't worry, the podcast continues.
She was like, I want you to go and get one slice of chocolate cake right now, and you're going to sit in a cafe and you're going to eat it really slowly, and you're going to enjoy every single mouthful. And that's it.
Right.
You're not going to have another one, and then you're going to phone me back.
Okay.
And I did, and I was able to have one slice of chocolate cake and not make it mean that I was, like a bad person. or I was using or any of these terms. It was just like, I just had the chocolate cake.
Right, I see.
And then I called her and she was like, how do you feel? And I was like, oh, I feel really freaked out. And like, she was like, okay, well, you know, and she was just amazing. She was just there for me.
Are you still in contact with her?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So it's been a long-term part of your ongoing recovery.
Yeah.
I know there was a couple of books as well that I think were quite game-changing for you.
Yeah.
One is Brain Over Binge. Is that
Yeah.
right? By Catherine Hansen?
Yeah.
Let me know if I get these right.
Yeah.
Another one is Women, Food and God by Janine Roth.
Yeah. I think that's kind of really helpful in terms of like getting away from these rules around food, like that is good, that is bad. You know, that's those two books really, really helped as well as seeing her and her.
I mean, how old were you then when you came across Julia? What age were you at that point?
So I'd been in like 20. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't in my early 30s.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Quite.
Yeah.
I was about to say quite a while, but I don't want to give. Kelly is 21 years old, ladies and gentlemen.
I think I'm 33, maybe 34. Don't know. It was, I'd been struggling a really long time.
Sounds like she uses some real kind of person-centered techniques with some CBT, and really got you to reevaluate your relationship with food, sort of almost one thought at a time, in a kind of very personal way, bespoke to you. That's how it's coming across to me.
It started very about the food, but really her approach was more it's about your thinking.
Yeah.
It's about your thinking, and you have to change your thinking because your thinking is what is causing you to act out in these ways. So we need to go back to your beliefs. What are you telling yourself? What story are you telling yourself? And that was really challenging, because then I was getting to all the negativity. It's like, oh my God, I'm so negative. Like, no wonder I'm like I am. And she really was trying to sort of help me to sort of I guess it's neuroplasticity, reprogram my brain into going, actually, no, things might be okay, and maybe I am good enough. And
started to challenge those kind of deep-seated things that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening to this and maybe they've got a loved one that they suspect has an eating disorder, or maybe someone suspects they might have, would therapy be your go-to? Would you suggest to someone that they try and find a therapist to help them?
I mean, I totally I currently going to go back into therapy because I think that even though I'm not bulimic, I've still got a lot of stuff that I want to work on, and that's on a deeper level. So I wouldn't say to someone therapy doesn't work, because I've seen friends who've done therapy, and I've seen them how it's really helped them.
Yeah.
So specifically with an eating disorder, I think, I would find a recovery coach. That would be my advice.
Okay.
And invest in, they are expensive, but it got better results than anything else I'd spent money on at that point, and I tried a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of what we both do, working in performing arts, particularly with that little thought that you've had since you were young that you're not good enough, how do you deal with rejection as an actor now? Because it sounds to me, with your backstory, that you must have become very resilient to that, bearing in mind what you talked about at the beginning. How do you find rejection?
Resilient?
How do you find rejection now? And by rejection, I don't necessarily mean people going no, but so often in performing arts and acting in particular, it's just not hearing anything, isn't it? You put all this work into something,
Yeah.
and then I think Woody Allen says it's not dog eat dog, it's dog doesn't return other dogs' phone calls. And sometimes the silence can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
What do you tell yourself now when?
Oh, I still struggle massively. I go through periods where I'm just like, I'm shit. But luckily I've got a few people in my life who kind of pick me back up and go, no, you're not. No, you're not. And yeah, I'd love to sit here and go, well, I've built a lot of resilience, and I really believe in myself, but I don't. I'm deeply insecure, but I think there's just that there is something about what I do that like really excites me and gives me a bit of like joy and kind of excitement and sounds really wanky, but bliss. And so those like tiny moments, those tiny moments they're the things that I keep going for, even though it's so hard. And yeah, I do struggle, and yeah, I'm always looking for ways to kind of help myself to cope with the industry.
One lesson that you've definitely learned, and you've helped me with, because I know that you've told me this, is that no job is going to fix how you're feeling inside.
Yeah.
Because you'll get a temporary high off it, and then you'll be left with whatever you're dealing with anyway. Yeah. And I think sometimes across the board, particularly with actors, perhaps, this is a generalization, this isn't everybody, that, if I get this job, then everything's going to be all right if I get this one. Yeah. And I think Anthony Hopkins said, his whole life he wanted to get to the top of the tree, and when he got there he was lonely. So all the stuff that you're talking about, working with your, working on yourself and going within, has ultimately been where the healing's happened, hasn't it, by the sounds of things?
Yeah. But that is and like you say, like learning, like when I have been working, going, oh, I'm still me, and I'm still having all the insecurities I have when I'm not working. So it never kind of, like you say, it never fixes it. Like when I had quite a good year last year, but it wasn't like suddenly I felt great. Like all of my insecurities just went into the job. So it's like it doesn't matter what's going on in my life. It's like it has to come from, it does have to, you do have to fix yourself within, because even if you're working, you're going to find, well, for me, I find reasons to support my belief system that I'm shit, that I'm a failure, that I'm not good enough. So it's ongoing. I feel like, yeah, it's just ongoing work.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, and I could talk to you for hours, and I'd love to have you back on in the future if you'll let me.
Yes.
To talk more, but I kind of want to end with this question, and I appreciate it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the beginning of the podcast where you talked about getting off the plane, coming back from Japan.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you had the opportunity to speak to that Kelly coming off the plane, what would you say to her now?
I knew you'd do this to me. Oh God, I would just say, I mean, I really want to swear, but I don't want to swear. You know what I mean?
You can swear.
I'd be like, fuck them, as in Japan and the agency and being thin. You are so much more than that. and just go and have a slice of chocolate cake and enjoy it.
And you know what? I think that's what we should go and do now. I think that's what we should go and do.
Shall we?
Yeah.
It's got to be good though.
Would
It's
you
got to
like
be a really good
Would
one.
you like a tissue? You see, I do actually look after my guests on School of Rock. I want you to see this is not the cheap stuff. That is the good stuff.
Really
right there.
soft.
Does it smell good? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it
really high quality, guys? Really
something
high
of
quality.
petunia, like with Nell and I? What's it? What does Monty say? I don't know. He sprays his boots for something, doesn't he? Can't remember what it is.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it.
Kelly, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. And there's going to be loads of stuff in the show notes, lots of links and other bits and bobs. Please do let us know in the comments any questions or any feedback you want from us. And just a huge thank you for coming on.
I feel like I need to pay you now for this session.
Well, you can if you like. No, I'm kidding. In the future, I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah.
Do a part 2.
Yeah.
I'd
love that.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but there was so much there, and it's going to help so many people. And anyone who is struggling with an eating disorder, or someone in their family or a friend or themselves, please just reach out and talk to someone. And like I say, in the show notes, there'll be lots of links.
Yeah,
there.
like you can Instagram me.
Yeah, I'm going to
Totally.
put all of Kelly's details where you can follow her as well in the show notes.
If you need, any advice.
As you can see, I'm really into the show notes. I've said it like 5 times. Show notes,
show notes, guys. Show notes.
The next episode is in 2 weeks. I've got an incredible guest coming on, as always. Stay tuned to my social media, also the YouTube channel, and I'll be dropping teasers on who's next and what it's about. But for today, we're going to have to wrap up and
get our chocolate cake.
Bye, guys. See you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Up the Gunners.